Hello friends, I'm Sanyukta and today we'll be learning another new Zentangle pattern. The pattern is called Chaining in Punzel. Yes. The pattern is, the look is somewhat like a chain when we draw it. But let's see how do we start. So what I've done here is started with this what should I say, two curved lines joined together at the top, right? And then another set of these curved lines joined together at the top, leaving a pretty small gap here, right? Again the same two curved lines coming somewhere here, joining these two lines at the ends, and then the second curved lines, right? A point worth noting here is I'm not extending these lines too much because I want this gap to be small, right? Like this, right? The second line, the curved line or the C shape that I'm drawing, you can make out it is almost straight, right? Again two curved lines like this. So I am not adding too much curve to the lines. In fact, I am trying to minimize this gap between the lines or two consecutive C shapes, right? These spaces are generally filled up. Why I am trying to minimize this space, you may get some idea when we add or learn the pattern Punzel, right? Punzel is nothing but an extension of this pattern chaining. Again two curved lines, the first one touching the end of the earlier, right? Again two lines, you can make out the second line is almost straight. That's the key to reduce the gap, right? So this is how we draw the pattern chaining, nothing but C shapes or curved lines, and we go on and on like this, right? Filling up the gaps. So will it be wrong if you give a more curve to the line? No, you can draw it that way also, just that your punzel will be more seen or visible if these lines are a little less curved. See, I am adding a little extra curve. You can draw it this way also, there is nothing wrong. I am still minimizing the gaps. However, I have added a little more curve to the lines, right? And then again in this, right? In case you are drawing it with very big gaps, something like this, then these gaps also provide you a lot of, space to play around with. You may not ink it. Instead of that, you may do something else with the gap, right? So I have increased the gap a little bit. So just ink it and put some dots or make some other patterns coming out of the gap, right? We'll see how can we play with the gaps also when we draw our tile if possible, right? So this is the basic pattern chaining. The name somewhat similar to how it looks, right, like a chain, and punzel is nothing but an extension of this pattern, which we'll learn in the second session, and draw a tile also along with it, right? So in front of me is a square tile, right? I'll show you two of the tiles that I've already drawn using the pattern chaining. This pattern on both sides is chaining, right? You can see how I have used the pattern in this style, and this is again chaining used in a spiral, right? Inside is a fragment used with tangle pattern well, and basically I wanted to show how chaining has been used in a spiral here, right? So same pattern, different looks. Let's draw a third tile today. So in front of me is a square tile, so the 4 dots in place. right? And then I'm drawing a rough string, going to draw my chaining somewhat on these lines, right, like this, and leave a small circle inside, right? So it's a rough string, pencil string, don't intend to ink it, just a reference point to draw my chaining. So I'm starting like this, two curved lines, again trying to minimize the space between the lines, again two curved lines, again the same, the second one almost straight, right, again two curved lines, using the line as a reference point, right, and then I stop here, again start from this side, so one place how you can create tangulation in a chaining is the spaces that are left in between. If you want to make the spaces bigger, then instead of inking them, you can also play with those spaces. The second is these shapes formed by the two consecutive curved lines, right? Inside these spaces also you can add tangles or embellishments. So that's another way to create tangulations or play around with the pattern chaining. Right? So I'm going to join them here like this, right? Then again starting from this side, as I told you, you can add more curve to these lines. However, your punzel looks better when these lines are a little straight, which we'll see in our next session when we learn to draw punzel. Nothing new, just an extension of this pattern chaining, right? So I have, you can see how it is looking. So the fourth one, again just follow the same steps. The first line is touching those other two lines ends, and the second is almost straight, and both are curved lines, right? Small spaces in between. If the spaces are small, they always look good if they are colored or inked. If they are big, they provide you options to tangulations, right? So now what I'm going to do is add a thin line of aura very close to my chaining. I generally do this because if I think that I'm going to add a pattern inside and the pattern is going to involve some inking, then that inking and the inking involved in my chaining should not mess up. They should look separate and distinct, right? So that's one of the reasons why if I am trying to fill up another pattern inside, and if I think that pattern may involve some inking, I separate the outer pattern, right? So now what I am going to do is add some poke roots inside, right? So we have already learned how to draw poke roots. Two lines, one line on the top of those lines like a head, and then a circle or an orb, right? So that's how we draw poke roots. I am going to leave this circle empty, not going to extend my poke roots inside it, right? So again, starting the other side. Right, so I'm going to fill up the entire space inside with the pattern poke root. So you can see here how I filled up the entire section and left a small gap in between, right? Now the next step should be to fill in these small spaces inside your chaining. Right? Like this. Right, so I'll fill in all these gaps, and I'm also going to fill in these small gaps that are left in between my poke roots. So you can now understand why I was trying to give a thin aura so that these two fillings don't get intermingled, right? So these small spaces that are left in between my poke roots, I'm going to ink them also, like this, right? So I have done the filling job here. You can see here the in between spaces between my poke roots and the small little gaps that were left in my chaining, right? Now in the leftover space, it is up to you how you want to go about it. I'm going to add the pattern welds that we learned in our earlier session. So adding that to weld grid, the three-sided weld grid, right, on all these four corners, right? So I'm just going to keep it simple, just adding some lines here, aura, right? Again, adding aura lines to the three grid lines that I drew. I'm just auraing that line and not very closely, leaving some gap. Like this, right? So again, clockwise, first line, second line, third line, right? And then small orb inside, left a highlight and colored the rest, and then aura. Since the auras are thick, again you can add something in between, like this, right? Right, so going to do the other two sides also the same way. Drawn lines clockwise, right? You can see here I have done the same exercise on all the four corners, right? Now let us move on to shading our tile. So how do we generally shade chaining? It's pretty simple, since these are intersections where the layers are going under. We add graphite at these intersections so that they give the effect of going under, right? like this. Or you can also add graphite at these points from where these two lines are starting or emanating, right? So this is also a way to shade. Again, there are no standard rules for shading. You can also add both kinds. In case your chaining is big enough, you can add at the intersections as well as at the beginning, both the places. Generally we avoid this if the chaining is not too big, because it will make entire chaining go gray, right? So in our tile, let us first start with the inside. So just a small inner line of shading, adding some graphite in the inside, right? Then on one side of the poke roots, like this, right? When poke roots are, overlapping each other, it's always nice to add some graphite at the overlaps also. For example, this portion, right? So looks pretty nice, gives the impact of going under, or the effect of drawing behind, right? So adding some graphite on one side like this, right? And now just with a very light hand going to blend the inside. Don't want the entire section to go gray, just a touch, right? And then blending this on one side, right? So just blending the graphite that I have put on one side. You can see one or two left here and there. You can just use the graphite already there on your stump. There is enough already there. So those small ones that I have missed out, I need not again pick up my pencil and add some more. Right, just blending all of my poke roots. You can also add alternatively on these lines, the straight line that I have put on the stem, you can shade on that also. There are many ways, right? And then the outer section, I'm going to add some graphite on this dividing line that I have drawn, the grid of the well, right, like this, and some on the outer side border, right? Like this, again on the dividing lines and on the border. right? And then our chaining, since they are pretty small, I'm just adding a touch of graphite on the intersections like this. Gives the effect of going under, right? So let us now blend it. With a very light hand, just moving the graphite away from the corner, right? Just a touch. I don't want the entire leaf to go gray. Just a touch. Like this, right? Again. Right? Again. Right? So that's how. Now going to blend the graphite on my well, leaving a highlight in between. You can add some graphite on the third side also here. Just make sure you don't mix up the graphite with the chaining. So left a highlight in between, right? So again, if you shade it this way, gives the effect of going under, right? These lines seem to be going under. Like this. Right? So the same exercise on the four sides. Leave a highlight. Again, add some on the fourth side also here. Just be careful that you don't put too much. Right? Like this. Again, de-emphasizing where the lines are going under, making it a little more dark. Like this. Right? And the third side. Why we leave a highlight? By now you know, you understand. Highlight gives the effect of a shimmer or a shine or luster in between, right? So the curls pop up. Again, some extra at these points. Right. So now I'll pick up my white charcoal, right? A touch on the white portion, to re-emphasize the highlight, like this, right? Oh, we forgot to blend one side. Yeah. So a little luster in between, so just add some chalk to emphasize it, right? Like this. So this is how our finished tile looks. You can, if you wish, add a touch of highlight on your chaining also, the portions which you have not added any gray, just a touch. Right? So that's how our finished tile looks. Some dots inside, up to you, entirely optional, right? Gives a little mystical look. Right? So I'm now going to initial my tile, sign and date it. And we'll meet in part 2 of the pattern chaining, where we'll learn how to make punzel, which is just an extension of the pattern chaining, right? Till then, have a good time, enjoy, stay safe. Bye-bye.